Hello, everyone. Welcome to our annual recap of the LMA International Conference, which took place a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta. The conference just keeps getting bigger and better. Not bigger doesn't necessarily mean better, but it does. In this case, it's getting bigger and better. There were more than 1,500 attendees. I don't know from how many countries, but it truly is an international conference. The number of sessions keeps growing, and the quality and sophistication of those sessions keeps growing. So we'd be here for a few days if I was going to give you a recap of all of the sessions. So we've just taken some of the highlights that we'll go over today. I'm Sharon Berman. My company is Burbe Marketing and Public Relations, and we create the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth. By the way, if you're interested in listening to the whole conference, they do sell the recordings of each session, and if you watch the LMA website, that'll be available probably in the next few weeks. Okay, the themes, the takeaways, but really the themes of the conference from session to session were communication, collaboration, and measurement. Communication, it seems obvious. Communication seems obvious, and when we notice communication is when there are glitches and we realize that somebody didn't communicate with another person or whatever. But really the theme was communication between in-house counsel and outside firms, or in-house legal departments and outside firms, between marketing and other departments within a law firm, or whether it's an outside agency and the law firm itself, but communication and avoiding some of the glitches that can happen. Collaboration, everybody on the same team, everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction. Once again, it seems obvious until you don't have it. And then it's like, okay, where's the collaboration? And then measurement. Measurement just keeps getting more and more important because there are more things that we can measure today as opposed to maybe 5-10 years ago. Online, there's so much we can measure, but also things we're just more cognizant with all the reviews and everybody looking at whether it's Yelp and the number of stars, or Amazon and products, or whatever it is, or just measuring and the importance of measuring, and how do you determine the ROI on some of your initiatives. Okay, so let's talk about the first session I want to talk about: legal operations and legal marketing, collaborating for success. And here you have everybody rowing in the same direction, which was the central theme, I would say, of this session. And it really focused on CLOC. If you haven't heard of CLOC, you'll hear more about it. CLOC, C-L-O-C, Corporate Legal Operations Consortium. It's been around about 10 years and has just been growing exponentially. They'll be having their conference next month in Vegas, and we'll give you the dates later. I wish I could go. They're going to have probably 3,000 people is what they're expecting. So, these are the panelists here. I'm not going to even try and pronounce all their names, but these are the panelists. They are in senior management, heading legal operations within corporations, and they are very involved in CLOC. I believe they may be board members, or at least have served on the board. And CLOC, really, they are focused on formalizing and measuring legal operations and focusing on in-house operational excellence for legal teams. So really what they want to do is standardize measurement, standardize benchmarks for outside lawyers and in-house lawyers. They also there's education. If you look at their website, they have 12 core competencies they talk about, but that was really what they emphasized here, was the formalizing and measuring legal ops. One example is, and they didn't mention it this session, but I'd heard it elsewhere, they are looking at, for example, creating a standardized RFP so that Fidelity is using the same RFP for law firms as Northwestern is, which, I mean, really fabulous idea. A challenge, but a fabulous idea. Okay, So, and one of the phrases they used, which I hadn't heard before and I thought was very striking, was lawyering at the speed of business. And that's really what they were focused on here. So about clock, the things that they were really, the themes or the topics, they were talking about communication and collaboration, measurement and performance, and also what made an impression on them. Let's see, legal operations is a relatively new field. They talked about when it comes to communication and collaboration, they talked about the fact that as soon as a company, a corporation, whatever, engages your firm, that you should be talking to people like them right away in terms of making sure that the process is going to go smoothly, that you understand what their e-billing system is, what their document upload system is, and that you are familiar with it and you can work with it so there are no glitches. And also so that they're, in a sense, they're calling the shots in terms of that you can work, you have to be able to work the way we do. They also talked the legal, and these are legal operations people, they talked about the fact that your lawyers or other, if not your lawyers, then somebody else in the firm should be talking to them. And sometimes lawyers don't want to talk to legal operations people, they want to talk to other lawyers. And in terms of communication and collaboration, this is a group of marketers they're talking to. They recommended or encouraged marketers, or whether it's administrators or whatever, to light a fire under the lawyers to talk with legal operations. Or if not, somebody needs to engage and communicate and look at everything outside of the lawyering. So communication and collaboration. And the woman from Delta gave an example of where there wasn't communication. And she said that one of the firms they use, an international firm, just for whatever reason, couldn't submit their invoices through Delta's system, but nobody communicated that. And therefore, the invoices weren't coming through. And when the monthly reports came out, her department was over budget, and she had to explain that to her management, and that's not something any of us want to do, is put a client in a bad situation or an uncomfortable situation. And she was saying that she didn't, if they had just communicated this in the beginning, that, okay, we want to work however you want us to work, but for whatever reason, our systems aren't talking to each other, then at least they could have worked on that and avoided this complication. So communication from the get-go being extremely important. And she also gave an example of they were looking for a lawyer or somebody to give a presentation on ethics in-house so they could get MCLEs. And we all know that ethics can be very difficult to, it's one of the more challenging credits to get. And she was reaching out to law firms to ask them, do you have somebody who can come in-house and talk on ethics? And she was saying, well, now why am I reaching out to the law firms? Why aren't they reaching out to me? And I know, I'm sure a lot of firms, whether they had somebody who could talk on ethics or not, would have been thrilled to get a call like that and scramble and find somebody who could go inside Delta and talk on ethics. So she was encouraging marketing people to be marketing, not just marketing people, but firms in general, to be looking at and keeping our eyes open in terms of what are the opportunities. Okay, in terms of measurement and performance, so this is really one of the reasons for clocks being in terms of measurement and performance. 1 second. So what are they measuring? First, they're measuring quality. What is quality? Okay, that's a challenge. How do you measure? How do you determine quality? So they're working on that, but right now, and the other things they're working on are speed. They're measuring speed. They're measuring responsiveness. They're measuring cost efficiency, and they have to figure out quality because quality drives everything, right? You can do it faster and you can do it cheaper, but you may sacrifice quality. But right now what they're focusing on are cost efficiency, speed, I want to say technology, which I'll talk more about in a minute, and responsiveness. And I think, again, it was the Delta woman was saying that speed and responsiveness seem really obvious, like you're going to do it as fast as you can and you're going to respond to me. But she was saying it isn't obvious. At least it's not obvious to some of the lawyers she works with. So to me, that creates a nice opportunity. You may not be the smartest person in the country or the best lawyer in the country, but you can be responsive, and you can turn things around quickly, whereas the smartest person in the country may not be doing that. So that, to me, there are opportunities there. One other thing that is really important to them and they're measuring is technical proficiency and digital savviness is what the words they use, digital savviness, in terms of the Fidelity person, Jamal, said you have to be as technically proficient as we are. You have to know how to use our systems, our document upload systems and our e-billing systems. And again, at a different clock session, this was a conference a while back, they talked about the fact that, at a minimum, you need to know how to use e-signatures, which clearly some people didn't know how to use them because they were talking about that. But you have to be technically proficient. And at Fidelity, the GC has mandated that they really curtail the amount of legal documents they're printing out and the amount of printing they do related to the legal department. And he basically said, I really don't care if partners aren't comfortable with this. This is the way we're doing it. So it's, once again, they have a level of technical proficiency. They are demanding, and they're measuring people on that. Also at Fidelity, he mentioned that this is also true, I think, at some of the other companies, they are not just measuring the performance of the outside lawyers, but they're measuring the performance of their in-house lawyers also. And at Fidelity, what they're trying to do is create a database of the outside lawyers, of measurements, feedback from the in-house lawyers on the performance of the outside lawyers, so that when there is a need to call on outside counsel, they can go to this database and look at and see how many stars he used an example of Amazon. So what comes to mind is the stars and the number of reviews and also, what the ratings are. So you can determine who you want to hire. And this is something that they across the board is something that they are, I would say most CLOC members are really trying to put together some sort of measurement and performance and benchmark. Cost efficiency is very important to them, of course. Jamal being the guy from Fidelity, emphasized that his job is how not to hire outside law firms. That is his job, and it doesn't mean he doesn't hire them, but he looks at what we'll call the legal services spectrum. And in terms of alternative legal services providers, he basically said, I don't know why they call them alternative, because they're not alternative, they're here to stay. And law firms are just another legal service provider. So what I'm being asked by the lawyers, the service I'm being asked as a legal operations person to figure out how to get it done, does that call for an axiom, or does it call for, a brand name law firm? And he says it doesn't matter. He's not after brand names. What he's after is who can do the job most efficiently and cost effectively. Let's see I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. I'm just trying to think. I'll jump to a different side note here. What was also very interesting was that the organization is Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, CLOC, but everybody on the panel said, we don't want to call ourselves legal operations because we don't do legal operations. Our job is to facilitate collaboration, and we talked about the other parts, measurement and that sort of thing. And they do everything in a legal realm except they don't lawyer. And some of them, I don't think anybody on the panel was an ex-lawyer, but a lot of times legal operations people formally practice law. And now this is what they're doing, or they have business backgrounds. Christy, the moderator, had an MBA, or they've just come up through the ranks. But for the most part, they're not lawyers. And then they were asked what made an impression, what made a good impression on them or a bad impression. And the woman from Delta talked about the fact that there was a very good impression. She had a firm make a very good impression on her, and that was that she said this firm consistently hit it out of the park. She thought they always did a good job, but they impressed her even more deeply because they had recently called her and said, we want to come out and talk with you and find out how we can do things better. And she just was floored by that because she felt, my God, you guys do such a great job. And here they're coming out. They want to find out how they can even do even better than that. So that really impressed her. And then one of the other panelists, it might have been the Northwestern woman, I'm not sure, talked about the fact that she is on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for CLOC. And this is making a good case for law firms to be involved in CLOC, not just be sponsors, but to be really involved. And she said that a chief diversity officer from a law firm was also on the committee. And they just gave so much of their time and effort and thought leadership that she was very impressed. And it also gave her a window into how that firm would operate. So even though right now they are not a client of her firm, she says that they left such a good impression. So it makes the case for being involved in CLOC. It also makes the case for being more than just, okay, here's a check, or okay, I'm doing this because it looks good on my resume or on the firm's website or whatever. So she talked about how that giving really paved the way for future business. Let's see. Just looking here, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Well, yes, one thing too is they talked about the fact that in terms of measurement, what they are hiring outside law firms for is for advice and counsel. And they also understand what they said. They understand relative value, and that it's really important to communicate the value that you're bringing in terms of if you are providing that advice and counsel, to be very detailed about it so that they understand what you're providing. And also to make sure that if you are coming up with a more cost-efficient way to do something, that you call that out. If you've somehow, reused information or something that's going to save them money, then you also call that out. And another word that is very, very important to them is innovation. If you've done something innovative, they want to know about it, and that's really a way to attract their attention. The other thing is they talked about artificial intelligence. I can't remember who it was, but they basically said, we are so tired of hearing about AI and artificial intelligence, and it's a buzzword. It doesn't really, show me what it's going to do specifically. Don't just throw it around because you think it's going to impress me. I need to know AI or no AI, what are you going to do for me, basically? So that was a very interesting session. I think it was a packed session, and to me, a very refreshing session in terms of just information that is newer on the market in a sense, and also from an area of the firms you don't usually hear from. So 1 minute, please. Okay, thanks. Okay, moving on. Another session, how to turn CRM into an insights engine. And here you can see the graphic. Basically, we spend a lot of money on CRMs, contact relationship management systems, client relationship management systems, and sometimes because they can be challenging in terms of onboarding the system, getting people to buy into it, it becomes basically a glorified Rolodex, and that's what they're trying to avoid here. And they talked about how else you can use, or you can avoid this syndrome. I'll call it the Rolodex syndrome. So we have our panel here. We have they were marked. One person came from a CRM. Intro Hive sells a CRM system, and the others were marketing directors. And they talked about the fact that this really, in order to make the system work, it really goes to the planning and pre-planning and identifying what the WIFM factor, I'll call it. What is in it for each practice group, because each practice group or each different areas of the firm may use the system differently and may want different information. For example, HR maybe wants diversity information, and maybe perhaps corporate wants information about funding needs, and then you also want alumni information. And the whole reason for having a CRM is for relationship building. Okay, who's on the same board, or who do we know who that we can put together in terms of capital providers and people who are looking for investment, that sort of thing. So it's really not just looking across the board at the whole firm, but really slicing and dicing and saying and talking with your different groups or your different lawyers and determining in advance what's going to be important to them, because that's going to be the way to get your buy-in. And if you, as one of the panelists said, if you only use it as a marketing tool, or if you only have it as a marketing tool, then your attorneys aren't going to use it. If they can't see why it's important to them, they're not going to use it. And we all know how sometimes it can be very difficult to exhort whether your attorneys, ask your administrative people to make sure that new contacts are added or something like that. If it's only going to be used for that, then it can really be an uphill battle. And in terms of data, making sure your data is good. It's better to have less data than to have more data that's not good. And so focus on the relationships that matter. Schools where people graduated from, investments, and also in terms of positions, if filling positions. I mean, that can go so far if you can help one of your clients find somebody for a position. And how do you measure the ROI on something like this? They talked about if you're tracking, okay, it's a little harder to track the value of the CRM at leading to business, but you can be tracking, I mean, it does lead to business, but you can be tracking, for instance, the number of contacts you have in your system, or the number of good contacts in your system, and how many contacts are being used in the new system compared with the old system, and how many client changes and updates are you capturing compared with what you had before. So in terms of looking at what the return on your investment is, you want to be thinking about that again from the beginning in terms of what are you going to track and what's going to mean success and what is the value. One firm talked about how they used it for succession planning. This was a rather large firm in terms of looking in who was available, who could they call on for succession planning in their own firm, and also looking at how they could help their clients in terms of when they needed to fill positions, I'll call it succession planning, but fill positions at a very, very top level. So if you have a CRM, it's worth taking another look at to see how you can make more use. If you're not making enough use out of it now, it's worth taking another look at. It may mean going back and modifying what you have. It may mean additional investment, but you'll be able to get so much more value from it than if it's just a Rolodex. All right. Okay. Next session was creating a niche market at mid-sized firms. And I use this graphic because you may have heard the phrase, there's riches in niches. I am such a tremendous believer in niching. And whether you, just because you, I mean, I'm maybe preaching to the choir here, but just because you're focusing on a couple of niches doesn't mean that you can't, that business won't come in from outside those niches, or that you can't be pitching other business, but it makes your marketing so much easier when you have niches and you can really focus your investment. One moment, please. Okay, so here we have, these were two case studies of how these mid-sized firms created niches that didn't exist. And this is not, I was going to say, this is really not looking at their current client list and creating these niches, but it was really, hey, we have these opportunities and how can we create these niches around them? One was a cannabis and controlled substance group, which they didn't have in the firm. And the other was an opportunity zone task force, which also wasn't in the firm. And they talked about how they it was really marketing that drove both of these. So it may be a little different scenario than creating niches when your lawyers are driving it more. But I mean, it was the inception. The idea came through marketing here. So the steps are going to be the same no matter what size firm, no matter where the idea germinates from, but these would be your steps. Market research. Does it make sense? What is the landscape like? How long is this phenomenon going to last? For example, Y2000 only had a certain window, right? And who even remembers Y2000? But what is the opportunity? What's the landscape? What's the competitive landscape? Who's doing what? Cannabis and controlled substance, maybe it's different out here, but to my mind, like if you haven't created your cannabis group yet, I think you're late to the party, because every firm has created, maybe not so much in other parts of the country, but at least out here, every firm, it seems, that's going to create its cannabis group is already at least pretty far down that path, or at least gotten that path off the ground. Okay, but how long is this going to last? And then your target clients from two perspectives. Who are you going to target? Who are your prospective clients? And then also, who within your current database are you going to target as guinea pigs or as friends of the firm? And we could talk a little bit more about that. But so you're looking at target clients from two perspectives. You need a fearless leader. This is true no matter where the idea comes from, whether it's one of your lawyers who is leading the charge, or whether you have to recruit somebody. They talked about the fact that they had to recruit. They had this idea and they wanted to put this niche together, but also you need a fearless leader. You need somebody who's going to lead the charge and is willing to lead the charge and understands that it's going to take time, effort, and patience. Because a lot of times it's after the excitement dies down when the real work starts, right? So if there's any kind of mild arm twisting at all, it has to be somebody who understands they themselves, the lawyer is going to be, or lawyers are going to be showcased, and it's going to give them additional visibility. So, but you do need besides management buy-in and management support, you need a fearless leader who's going to lead the charge. Okay, how are you going to position the firm? And this is why you need to know your competitive landscape, right? You want to know what your competitors around you are doing, what is their positioning? Is it a really upscale positioning? Is it a low price, high volume positioning? So you want to look at that, lay it out on your matrix or on your map, and then say, okay, where are the opportunities, and can we fill in here? And also, if you don't have your positioning, you can't determine your messages, right? So you need to know what your positioning is. You need to develop your plan. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things in terms of the plan is, who are you going to approach, and who are friends of the firm that will listen to you and say, yeah, no, I know you guys, you do good work. I'm willing to try this. And they also talked about the fact that this has to be built on something that, in a sense, already exists. Just as a branding has to be built on reality, in terms of, you can't make branding promises if you can't fulfill them. So, for example, the cannabis firm, the one that created the cannabis group, they already did a lot of land use and they did a lot of agriculture. So that makes sense. You can, cannabis has a lot of that, and you can really spin off from something like that. So you want to be looking at what already exists within your firm. not because you can't create it out of a blue sky. And then, of course, it's the execution. And that's where, of course, the rubber hitting the road. Execute and sustain. Measure and determine what your measurements for success are, but for sustain, because it takes patience. They talked about the fact that, I think it maybe took them 8 months after they launched one of these groups to even get their first client that wasn't a friend of the firm, and I think that's pretty fast, actually. 8 months. It takes time, effort, and patience. Both groups talked about the fact that using PR, public relations, was really important to establishing the group, establishing the credibility, establishing the visibility, and because this is all about packaging, really, and it's sort of repackaging. If it's land use and agricultural, it's really repackaging it with a cannabis bow on it, let's say. So, but you need to let the world know about it, and the way you're going to get, one of the fastest ways you're going to get credibility is by, being published, being quoted, articles, whatever it is. So they both talked about the importance of public relations in getting their groups launched. Okay, now this one here, before I start, I'm going to just take a break here a minute. David versus Goliath, the competitive world of plaintiff firm marketing. Plaintiff firms, it's encompassing and embracing marketers in plaintiff firms is relatively new for LMA. This is probably only within the last few years that they even created any kind of a special interest group for it. So it was really interesting to hear what people had to say about plaintiff firm marketing, and just the fact that now LMA is recognizing it in a sense, as opposed to just really, for a long time, they just focused on defense firms. So and plaintiff firms do marketing and a lot of it, so it just makes a lot of sense. So we have here the panel, and the points that they made were, well, first of all, the upside of being a plaintiff lawyer in terms of being able to modify corporate behavior, being, the satisfaction that plaintiff lawyers get. But there's also so much there's so many challenges today, because first, the competitive landscape, there's so many plaintiff attorneys around. It seems to get more crowded every day. There's a plethora of information to know, not just from a marketing perspective, but from your different markets. And there's an evolving marketplace in terms of, it used to be business came through referrals, and now it's direct to consumer. And also, as a plaintiff firm, you have to overcome what they called unsavory reputation. Plaintiff firms, first thing you usually think about is bus tails and billboards. So you sort of have to overcome that aspect also. They talked about the fact, and this is marketing 101 here for anybody. It doesn't matter what practice area you're in. Focusing, okay, and identifying your differentiators. What makes your firm different? Because there are a lot of firms that do auto accidents. There are a lot of firms that do slip and fall and things that are much more upscale than that. But I'm just saying, it's really the exception that you're the only one doing it. So what are your differentiators? Look at how you're doing it. What is it? Because your people are more hands-on in managing things? Is it because doing it longer, of course, but also looking at how, is it you're all women? What are your differentiators? So you know what to communicate. In order to make your money go as far as possible when it comes to marketing, you really want to be as narrow as possible, and you want to be able to differentiate yourself and make an impression and brand yourself in your market's mind. I know, once again, marketing 101, but I just want to emphasize that. Okay, and they talked about going beyond SEO. In today's world, it's gotten online marketing has gotten so much more complex and so much more detailed, and it takes such expertise today. And they talked about the fact that it's not a matter of just knowing which keywords to optimize anymore. It's really knowing about syndication. It's knowing what content is ranking high. It's just knowing a lot more. It used to be 10 years ago, I could say to somebody, okay, well, if you don't have the money to embark on a really big SEO program, why don't you just start at least writing your content with some keywords in mind or search terms in mind. And that doesn't cut it today. It's so difficult. There's no do-it-yourself today. And if you are a marketer managing a marketing department and online marketing is one area, you need an expert who can really manage that area. You can manage them, but it takes such expertise today. It's in terms of being a successful firm online. Let's see. They also talked about, there was some other point here I wanted to make. Yes, digital. That, of course, most plaintiff marketing today, so much of it's digital, and that hard for me to believe, but there's still lawyers around or partners around, according to the panelists here, that have to be sold on this or are still resistant to this, and that you have to make the case to them or show them examples or whatever about the fact that you need to be going online. A few years ago, for a while, we were really getting calls from seasoned lawyers who were plaintiff firms and who said, listen, I've been doing this 25, 30 years, but I'm not getting leads right now because the leads are going to I'll use the term kids, or not kids, but, young people right out of law school who know how to market online. And they are getting these leads, and these leads should be going to me. And I don't know if maybe they got smarter, these seasoned lawyers got smarter or hired the right people. We don't get as many of those calls today. But if you're in the plaintiff world, to me, it's just a given. You have to be online. You have to be digitally savvy. You have to be putting your money. So it's complex. It's costly, but there's a return. Definitely, if you're doing it right, there's a return on investment with leads and qualified matters. So it's marketing in terms of the basics being the same, but in terms of the tactics, different really an emphasis on the online and the measurement, being able to measure. And they talked about, and we know this from our own experience, it's the intake process that is the most important aspect of all of this. Because if you have these leads coming in and they are not being processed correctly, then you're losing a lot of money, you're losing a lot of value, and not only processed correctly, but tracked. What are you turning away, and where are those coming from? Meaning, did those come in via this search term? And how, the cases that you're getting that do make your vetting process, that do get past the vetting process, where are those coming from? So it's really, I know because we have set up intake processes for several plaintiff firms, and the tracking is so important, but it's also so gratifying and satisfying to be able to see, wow, look at that, these leads came in, and this is where, these turned into matters, and that turned into money, and that sort of thing. Anyway, one last point on this. They talked about proactive versus reactive marketing when it comes to plaintiff firms. One being proactive is identifying the niches, not waiting for things to happen, but to identify where things were coming from. I remember a few years ago, we got a call from a plaintiff firm. They anticipated that there were going to be a boatload of cases coming in from it wasn't asbestos, it was something like asbestos, but they were wanting to put together their web page and everything, and they were like ready for it, and before the news had broken even. So they're using that as a proactive example. Reactive is when all the IKEA furniture was falling, and you're going, oh my God, the IKEA furniture is falling down and hurting people. Let's get the landing page up and let's get going. Which there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a little, if you're ahead of the curve, you're going to have the advantage at least for a while. Okay, if you excuse me 1 minute again. Okay, so here are the LMA conference co-chairs, which is, talk about taking on a second, third, and fourth job. Erin Mazzaros and Andrew Laver, they did a fabulous job. We interviewed them post-conference and got the scoop and the behind-the-scenes scoop, and we will be posting that podcast on May 1st. We host the Law Firm Marketing Catalyst podcast, and you have the link here. If you can download it on iTunes or wherever you download your podcast from. We'd love you to join and listen, and we try and bring lawyers, people, consultants, marketing people who can help move your firm forward. So check out the Law Firm Marketing Catalyst podcast, and you'll hear from Erin and Andrew on May 1st. And we post those on the website, so they're up for a while. Okay, and then here, if you have your calendars, here are some upcoming conferences that I think are worthwhile at least knowing about and hopefully attending some of those. Clock is having their conference in May. It sounds fabulous. If you can get there, I'm sure it will be worthwhile. Legal Sales and Service, LASSO, is having their conference beginning in June in Chicago. LASSO, it's a smaller conference in LMA, much smaller, but it's a really jam-packed. It's a really thought-provoking. It's definitely worth the trip. I've gone quite a few times. Definitely worth the trip. A Legal Marketing Association P3 conference, Practice Innovation Conference, is coming up the following week. So you can, if you want to stay in Chicago. The Legal Marketing Association Tech West, it's a regional conference, but it's really, people come from all over the country, is happening in October. And of course, the Marketing Partner Forum, it's been on the West Coast the past few years, but this year they're going back to Miami. So I guess we'll be going down to Miami. But that once again, these are all worthwhile conferences. But I'm just saying that that's a fabulous conference. And then next year's LMA conference is going to be in Denver, March 25th to 27th. So you can put those on your calendar, and I hope to see you at some of those. So if you have questions, please, I'm Sharon Berman. My email, my phone number is there. I'd be happy to talk to you further about anything here. And thank you so much for listening.